there is this sense now that new technology, big data, the planet of the phone, etc., makes possible a degree of personalization of delivery to the customer in all sorts of ways that was really only dreamt of a few years ago. And the title of the session is the customer always right?, which I guess plays into the notion that's always been out there in the advertising world that the customer is king, but also, does all this innovation make it more true that the customer is king, or are we actually going into an interesting other sorts of world where maybe it's easier for the customer to be manipulated by companies to go beyond advertising as a technique for personalizing sales? And is it easier to get rid of customers you don't want as well as to serve customers better, and how might consumers think about that? Anyway, I wanted to start with Beth, because, I mean, you have a company that is really all about that greater connectivity between, you're taking a customer who basically wants to eat a meal, and you're giving them much better choice in principle as to what meal is going to turn up at their door. How close now are you to what you think will be the end game of home food delivery?
I think we have a long way to go, simply because it's a $70 billion marketplace of takeaway food, and like 5% of it is online. So there's enormous opportunity just in terms of awareness that there is a better way for people. And then also, I think over time, as people start to realize that they can use their phones as a remote control for their life, and that they can really do almost anything that they want to do on demand, they're going to say, I'd actually rather do what I'm doing than cooking. And they're going to substitute more and more towards convenience. So,
I mean, what is it that your technology is changing about the whole process of ordering a meal, which, I mean, to be delivered, which is a very, it's been around for decades as a phenomenon?
I think that we are, creating a two-sided marketplace of diners and restaurants. And so by aggregating the demand, which is really challenging to do, and aggregating the supply, we've created an ecosystem where people have one place where they can go, and they know that they can get dinner or lunch right away, and it will be delivered to them hot. It will be, appealing, and they'll have a good experience overall. So the more that we build on that and build a brand on that, the more that it rings true for people, and it's something that becomes part of the fabric of their life, like a verb.
So what are you learning about what the customer wants that surprised you in some ways?
We see a lot of really surprising things. So as you start to look into the data, you start noticing things like, okay, there's a lot of late night dining in San Diego, and there aren't so many restaurants that are open. So we need to find more restaurants that are open late night in San Diego, or we need to talk to restaurants and say, hey, you've got unmet demand. There are a lot of people who want to get delivery food, and we actually will go and talk to restaurants and say, you should consider delivering to these boundaries, not the ones that you've got today, but ones that we know you've got demand for, based on our horizontal view of the marketplace. And we go to them and we say, these are hours when you stop delivering at 11 p.m., but the demand doesn't stop then. You should consider working a little bit later. A lot of times the restaurants are even open, but they've stopped employing delivery people because it just seems too late for them. So we'll actually work with them, giving them our broad customer data, because they've only got this vertical slice of the world, and we've got this broad horizontal one.
And is the same happening with menu choices and things of that kind? What other things are you telling restaurants they need to do differently?
Yeah, menu, I think, is something that we're going to get into more and more. It's a little bit harder to normalize menus because someone might call a dish one thing on one menu, and then another restaurant might call a very similar dish something different. And normalizing it across those menus is more of a data challenge. It's something we've been working on, and we're making a lot of progress towards. And we've started to communicate with restaurants on that. Things like, this dish sells really well in this market is a huge opportunity.
Now, Bob, I mean, we talked about one industry segment where the customer is suddenly being empowered in a different way, and that has all sorts of implications that we're just starting to see for the structure of delivery to the industry. But you look across a whole range of industries. Where do you see the biggest improvements in making the customer king?
Well, I mean, they really, you took that vertical slice, and I think, there's aspects of it that represent the product. And that may be a product from a restaurant in this particular instance. There's aspects that relate to the supply chain or the demand for the product. So you can imagine that exists across, many instances. And then the notion of that customer sentiment, how are they enjoying the experience? Was it enjoyable for them? Would they do it again? What could be changed in order to make that better? So being able to understand how to eliminate churn and create more client loyalty. So those three areas really apply to financial services institutions. They apply to insurance companies as they think about risk, telecommunication churns models, consumer packaged goods. So you can see those patterns. They also apply to public sector organizations as they look to really create a greater sense of engagement with their citizens. And it's a difficult problem, Matthew, because there's one notion of being able to identify the sentiment out of a very, very noisy a source of data, like Twitter as an example. And that can be very difficult because there's no grammatical consistency, there's lots of new words, and being able to do semantic integration of that is not a trivial challenge. But then it's also how to relate that signal of some individual to a consumer profile that you have in your organization. And that's where a lot of organizations struggle in being able to create a stronger signal of identity between multiple channels of listening that they want to do a better job of creating a better product, increasing loyalty, and minimizing churn in their organization. That's on the consumer side. There's a whole other set of things that you can imagine this applies to when you think about the breadth of unstructured data and how you can transform industries by understanding the unstructured data. The social data is a very structured, noisy space, but there's lots of other structured, noisy spaces. Think about the way doctors and lawyers interact with information, very bespoke vocabularies, specific ontologies by industry, and they want to do a better job of serving their clients in a different way. So they're trying to listen to more research and then do a better job of applying a therapy or a solution pattern for the individual they're serving.
Now, Jim, I mean, at Google, I mean, you guys, I remember talking to your chief economist, Hal Varian, he was saying, at any moment in time, we're probably conducting 10,000 experiments, to learn more about the customer, I guess. And so what are you finding that you're learning and you're able to give to your clients that are paying you for advertising on your site and so forth, that's improving their ability to get the customer what the customer wants?
Yeah, so Matthew, I mean, to the core premise of the session, is the customer always right or is the consumer always right? I mean, I guess similar to my fellow panelists here, I would say generally yes, with the caveat that what the consumer wants has to also work for the other key players in the ecosystem. So in Beth's case, right, what the diner wishes also then has to work for GrubHub and for the restaurants. Similarly, in our case, typically what we find is we look at signals, and I can talk about some of the things that the end consumers, users of our consumer products, YouTube, Android, Chrome, et cetera, Gmail, what they're looking for. But then it also has to work for the advertisers who wish to connect to those customers, and then the publishers in many cases who have the inventory where those advertisers wish to place their ads and connect to the user. So connecting that ecosystem, I think, is a theme that I'm seeing in our business and in these businesses as well. Yes, consumer and there are other players in the ecosystem as well.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point that Jim's raising is, in a lot of the enterprises we work with, there's a greater sensitivity now to the exogenous data. So, what they have and what they possess and how they made decisions is really being rapidly transformed. I actually think it's being underscored really around this notion. I think big data is kind of an overused term, but what's really happening is IT value creation is no longer focused on industrializing business process, which I think was very relevant up to about 5 or 6 years ago, but it's really shifting to what I think is an insight economy, where IT value is really being focused on how do you get insight from multiple application domains of data matched together with all this exogenous data and multi-channel data to really unlock new business opportunities.
I mean, I want to talk to you a bit about, IBM has this partnership with Twitter, which is very interesting. And if you look at that, how does that provide insight, and what are you learning from that relationship?
Well, first off, there's an unprecedented access to the entire history and real-time understanding of what's going on in the Twitter data streams. And it is very much a sea of white noise for most organizations that try to wrestle with it. So we get that great insight, but also the ability to look longitudinally about how customer attitudes are changing, right? So, like Jim was talking about, things matter on a temporal basis as well. So someone's tastes and behaviors might change, and you want to be able to understand those signals.
But to ground that, though, in an example, I mean, would you be following a hashtag for a particular company or a particular topic? Or?
Much richer than that.
Yeah.
People want to be able to create, taste maps and flavor maps of things that are going on around the world. That could be related to fashion. It could be related to food. It could be new ethnic styles that are emerging that are, potentially influential on trends. There could be aspects of increased risk in certain populations. There could be intersections of weather-related and climate and demographic data that are also now all of a sudden influencing sentiment and favorability to act or favorability to not act. And so those things all are real-time aspects mixed together with a longitudinal view of multiple data sources. What we're finding is there's multiple vectors of information, and most organizations possess some of what they need, but there's a lot of it that's exogenous. And whenever you're reaching outside of your organization, your ability to match and combine that data, Beth was just talking about menu data and being able to think about the title on a dish with a few ingredients that could provide aspects of a key to be able to put together something that looks similarly. That's difficult in its own right. Now imagine doing that over hundreds of data sources with very, very dirty language in some of the spaces that you have to really extract essence out of.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, with Twitter, I think when that first took off as a consumer tool, it was very much people realized that phoning up a company and being with a complaint, and you just got stuck on press 3 for endless music and so forth. But essentially, if you tweeted, there was some poor person in the Twitter department at that company that hadn't got much work to do, and so they would actually respond to your tweet more quickly than and that was about the extent of it. Now, are you now saying that companies are using the information on Twitter to really go beyond that sort of emergency reaction sort of
Absolutely.
thing to actually product design and so?
Fundamentally transforming the business process. We've done some extensive work with a media and entertainment company that does real-time analysis in multiple buckets of demographics over the trailers that they're now presenting for the movies that they're about to release. And they want to know in real time, what's the sentiment from the frequent moviegoers who are the most influential on, day one openings and the receipts that they're likely to get for that investment in the movie. And they can get information from this work that we're doing that gives them the indicators on how to maybe re-edit that trailer so it's more pleasing. They can see signals that might give them actionable insights on where the merchandising revenues are going to emanate from based on the way people react to aspects of the trailer, and really producing ultimately a better product for the consumers that they want to engage. That's just one example, and we're doing this across many, many industries.
And oftentimes, I'm sure you see that the results of that analysis might challenge the ingoing beliefs or conventional wisdom of the brand stewards or brand managers.
Yep.
So, similarly on YouTube, often you use your movie trailer example. A movie studio might have a very fixed idea of who the prime prospect or target audience is for that movie, but looking at the data stream of actually, who are the users that are watching that trailer on YouTube might then suggest, oh, well, we thought it was younger men, maybe it's older women, et cetera, which then can allow you in real time to adapt and adjust your marketing plan based on what you saw from that data stream.
Right.
I mean, to pick up on that point, though, I mean, I guess we've gone from thinking about brands as something that can be tightly controlled by the company to something which is now more of an engaged conversation and is shaped by that two-way and perhaps three-way between customers as well. I mean, where are you seeing the biggest shifts in brand in that sense from that experience?
Well, I mean, to continue sort of on the YouTube theme that I was referring to earlier, I think one of the things that we see is the big shift from ads or messages from brands that are forced or interruptive, as is with the TV model. If you'd like to watch the NCAA basketball tournament, well, you will be back in 90 seconds after the following words from our sponsor, and you will have to wait. Whereas in the YouTube model, what we're increasingly seeing brands shift towards is a user choice model, which is if you'd like to watch this video, you have the option to see what hopefully is a relevant, useful, helpful, and timely message from an advertiser. If not, you have the ability to skip it. And that user choice then wins for all parties in the ecosystem, because then if the user chooses to see it, it's of more value to them than a forced view. The advertiser learns something about it, and then the owner of that video, for which the ad was a pre-roll, earns some revenue as well. So it supports all elements of the ecosystem. It's a very different model than what we all learned growing up in the business.
I think one of the things that's really interesting about this kind of rich data is customers are notoriously bad at predicting their future behavior and saying, I'm going to do this if given the opportunity, but you can start to tease out the signal from their behaviors over time, looking at, they tweeted this, their response was this, and then did they go see that movie? Right. And then you can go and build a case from that.
As opposed to the focus group model where people say, yes, I think I would do that.
Right. In one example, Matthew, one of the large financial services institutions that has a very rich business around credit was looking to match hundreds of millions of consumer profiles that they have, each with a score that represented potential risk model that they wanted to pursue. They were having a difficult time really aligning with this social sentiment of individuals that were possibly ready to express an action or possibly expressing a stress event. But they couldn't bring that data together. And predictively, we were able to help them identify about 2 million ready now opportunities for them to change their handling of those consumers based on a almost imminent purchase decision or an almost imminent aspect of a stress element that they wanted to think about more deeply in their risk model, all based on predictive analytics.
And I think that brings us to maybe the current frontier or challenge in this area, which is having a single view of the customer across multiple channels. Right? So do I know that it's the same person who did that tweet, who also then maybe has a registered account with me, walks into a branch or walks into a bricks and mortar store, watches a YouTube video, et cetera. How do I put that together so that I'm not treating the customer 4 different ways because I think it's 4 different customers?
Right, and their sensitivity when they're in one channel, Jim, as you know, and Beth would know, is different. They want different kind of responses if they're interacting with your brand in one channel versus the other. And so you have to understand how to build that richer signal of identity across multiple channels, but also what's their susceptibility to that response and action, because when they're interacting in some channels and you do something to respond, they would look at that potentially as very spooky.
Now, how close are we to having that fully joined up view of the customer across the different channels? Because I mean, obviously there are legal protections supposedly in place, some tougher in Europe than in other places that are supposed to stop that happening. On the other hand, presumably there are technological challenges, as you mentioned, linguistic challenges and interpretation as well. But how close are we, Bob, to getting that that really good view?
We're there, Matthew. It's not a function of being close. We are there now. In the case of the Twitter data, it's public data.
Right.
So being able to utilize those signals of information.
But you presumably can't link the @MattBish Twitter account to my credit card data at the moment, or can you?
No, not to the credit card data, but to a rich consumer profile in a company with an opt-in policy around application and other elements with other channels of interaction.
But if I continue to opt out, you're not able to get
No, actually, we fully respect consumers' rights and selections on being able to opt out. So everything that we do is sensitive to customer privacy and security. So when that's
But do you think I should be opting out as much as I am? Am I losing out as a customer?
You're losing out.
Am I persuade me of that?
It's a generation gap. When you think about it, you'll have had experience with this. We'll bring the dinosaurs back on stage to talk about this. But as it relates to that degree of feedback and the openness and sharing, I mean, we're dealing with, really the first.
So if I were 25 years younger, I'd be opting into everything. And what would I be enjoying as a consumer?
You'd be sharing your location. You'd be opting in.
And why would I be better off?
Well, I mean, I do think you get a better intimate set of services and understanding of what your preferences are and how they're changing over time, if that's the case. And so, you'll be opting in with those service providers that you want to have a relationship with, and those that don't, meet your standards of service, well, you'll deselect them as opposed to those service providers deselecting.
Well, deselecting always seems to be harder than selecting, doesn't it? I don't know why that is.
But I think from a company's perspective, they've only got one bite at the apple, and so they're trying to do, companies all around are trying to do a much better job of giving you the value proposition of sharing data. Do you want to share your location if it is in the context of something that you can understand why sharing your location is valuable to you? Oh, if I share my location, I don't have to type in my address to get food delivered to me. That makes sense to people, and so they're much more willing to share their location than if you ask too soon in the process.
Okay, so let me be the devil's advocate slightly here. I mean, America has a chronic obesity problem. A lot of fast food that's delivered to people's homes, arguably is very bad for them. The data that you get will allow you to have a much more acute sense of when they're feeling hungry or stressed, etc. Therefore, in the mood for some comfort food. And a good app could be designed to basically ping them at that particular moment on their mobile device and say, aren't you really yearning a huge bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken at this particular moment in time? And the customer afterwards will say, yeah, great, I'll do that. And then 2 hours later, they'll be feeling fatter than ever. And will they be right? Because we know that, you're right at what, the customer is right, sounds all wonderful, everything. But actually, we know we're all susceptible to all sorts of temptations and things that we don't like about ourselves and consumer behavior that we don't particularly like. And you can optimize around all and I can imagine financial services companies, for example, credit card companies, their optimum customer is the person that keeps forgetting to pay their bill, to pay off their balance every month. And they don't want people like me who generally do remember to pay off the balance. And so you can imagine much greater optimization around, the customers that are high margin, good lifetime value customers, and moving away from people who aren't using this data. So why is it a good thing?
And
what are you going to do about that Kentucky Fried Chicken? Are you going to take that opportunity or not?
So I think the answer is no, simply because what we have found through tests is that push notifications are really relevant and really meaningful for people when they're meaningful and relevant, right? So knowing the restaurant has my order and my food is on the way, that's a push notification or a text message that I want to get. Knowing, hey, there are 300 restaurants that could deliver to you right now and I'm not hungry is completely not relevant and not something that people want to hear. And that's when they turn off push notifications, when you give them information like that. So
but what if that moment when I am feeling hungry, you actually push to me, the Kentucky Fried Chicken option? Wouldn't I welcome it at that point, or would I turn that off?
I think first of all, that's really hard to know, and it's the danger of getting it wrong is much worse than the upside of getting it right. Because if you're hungry and we're top of mind anyway as a food solution for you, then you'll come to us. I don't think that we need to push to you. And in terms of, at the end of the day, I think it really comes down to customer experience. And if you say, well, I got the fried chicken I wanted, but I didn't really want that, that's something that you don't associate as a positive experience long term, and we're really all about having long-term positive relationships.
Actually, Jim, you joined from traditional advertising, and you joined Google.
Yep.
And there was this debate forever, and there continues to be a debate about advertising. Is it actually providing the customer with the information they need to make a better choice, or are you manipulating them in some sense to buying something they don't really want? And how does the big data revolution for you alter that debate?
Yeah, our belief is that advertising should be useful, helpful, and relevant content. It shouldn't be some other thing that keeps you away from the content that you want. So, in its earliest manifestation with us was if you typed a search for best kids bike, right, then up with that would come maybe some reviews from Consumer Reports or places like that. But if you were a bike manufacturer and had a quality product and you wanted to put an ad at that moment, useful, helpful, and relevant in real time, our system would encourage that matching. And as a user or a consumer, you ideally would find that as useful, a message from a brand, as it would be from a review site or a publication.
One of the really interesting conversations that's happening at the moment is how is the shift to mobile, and particularly to mobile apps, going to alter that whole search process? Because we've become used over the last 10 years to going to Google and having that choice of paid for search and then algorithmic search. But maybe if we're going to an app world, we just go to the GrubHub, the seamless app, and we don't go through Google anymore. And is that going to alter things? And how are you thinking about that at Google?
No, we think a lot about that as to how can we meet consumer needs to answer the questions that they have in a world where increasing amount of time is spent on apps. Saw a factoid the other day that I need to go check and verify, but apparently more time is now being spent in apps than on desktop computers in the US. Seems reasonable. I have to go trust but verify that stat. But I think the stat that is emblazoned on everybody's brain is, from the company Flurry, that said 86% of time on a mobile phone is now spent in app and 14% is spent in MWeb. True, in our experience, though, we see that it's a little bit different when you're looking towards commercial intent. When I'm looking to buy something, to research something, to engage with a brand, MWeb takes up a greater share of importance. Obviously, a great deal of time that's spent in app time is in social and gaming, as opposed to things with commercial intent. So, we think about both MWeb and app, and that's typically the conversations that we would have with our brand partners and brand customers. It's a yes and world. You need to win from commercial intent in MWeb, and in the right case, have a strong app when it makes sense.
But with the app model, I mean, Bob, does the conversation with the consumer change significantly from the conversation that was happening on the browser, essentially?
Well, yeah, I mean, I do think that there's a richer sense of engagement inside the app model. I do think, though, there's a limited scope of information that could be shared, and I think Jim was pointing that out. But when you're in that app model, you're also you're usually more willing to open up other channels of sharing information about your experiences than you will just in a mobile web environment. Back to your Morgan Spurlock thread of questioning, I do think that there's another aspect, which is that the other rich information that can be shared. About 90% of all the sensor information that are on the mobile devices we carry around isn't typically captured and put to effective purpose, and also thinking about improving behavioral patterns. So as we do work in healthcare with Watson, one of the things that we are looking at is predictively understanding how to positively influence that behavioral moment when you're ready to walk into that Kentucky Fried Chicken, and that individual hasn't necessarily exercised a lot during that day, or maybe they're have some hypertensive tendencies. So that's an interesting moment to be able to remind them about a healthy choice. Or about other aspects that could be available to them that might taste just as good, but might lead them to a better long-term outcome for them and their family.
And so you'd expect more apps of that kind to develop that would empower the consumer to their better self.
Absolutely, and if you look at the thread of rich involvement around health devices and biomedical sensors, I mean there's a very, very large indication that the consumer population is interested and willing to do that. The gamification between individuals around collecting that information and sharing it, almost creating, contests from across large landscapes, indicate that that is actually something that could be a very positive influence on the very obesity problem that you talked about.
And I think we saw a big move in this space by a brand recently, is J&J's acquisition of the 7-Minute Workout, which is now the J&J 7-Minute Workout app.
Right.
And before we go to the polling question and then the audience, I just want to ask you, Bob, one more question. I mean, there's been this, a lot of conversation recently about Facebook and the way a lot of companies built up this huge base of people who liked them on Facebook, and then suddenly Facebook is now starting to maybe not allow you to share commercial information and advertising and so forth without paying Facebook for the privilege. And so all this building up the likes seems to have been a bit of a waste of time in some ways. I mean, what's going on there, do you think? Is Facebook less useful as a channel, or is it going to be more expensive as a channel for companies? Is it going to be more like traditional advertising?
I think Jim's probably the best one to give an opinion on that.
What do you think, Jim?
Well, I mean, statement of fact is that organic reach of a brand's followers for a brand message in the news stream has greatly decreased over, the preceding years. And I'm sure many of our audience members, have had that personal experience as well, as it's shifted to a more advertising model there. But, again, we probably would defer to Facebook to speak on their own behalf there.
Okay, a polling question. If you go to your apps or your phone, The question this time is, which of the following business model innovations will you be implementing over the next 3 years? A, enhancing customer experience. B, finding new ways to monetize existing products and services. C, serving an unserved or underserved customers. New value offerings, moving from a product to a service model, or lower cost models. I think it's the one you're most likely to be introducing over the next 3 years, so just pick one of those. Okay, so if you'd like to put your answers in, we'll see what comes back. Okay, and on the, it does look like you could tap on all of those things, actually, if you want. For the PwC service, I mean, all of those are quite popular, but enhancing customer experience for both you and PwC, it's 1,700 executives that it interviewed. Yeah, good. So that's good for the customer. And we didn't have a question about sort of getting rid of customers you didn't want, but we can.
That's really the canonical answer in there, is that sense of engagement, right? And I do think that, there's a couple of elements to that. One of them is that immediate sense of response and, feeling like you're being served in a way that's valuable. But there's another aspect of that engagement, which is efficacy of role of the individuals that are serving. And what we're doing in information technology to really empower those roles, to allow an IT transformation in those roles that haven't really been well served in the former generation of the programmatic era of IT. As we shift to the cognitive era of IT, then we can use much more machine learning, much more predictive analytics, and real cognitive analytics to be able to extract hypotheses that really will allow the democratization of best practice and greater practitioners to serve individuals. So greater customer experience is not just in that B2C model, but it's very much also in that notion of the professional to that individual, whether it's a lawyer or a doctor.
Okay, we're going to go to the audience for comments, questions. There's a couple of people in the middle there. Why don't we take those two to start with? The mic is just coming to you, and please do say who you are and who you're with. And as Vijay says, be witty and to the point.
Hi, I'm Doug Stone. To use a metaphor that you used about remote control for your life, it seems like the discussion is between people who are on automatic pilot and people who are using their phone as a remote control. In thinking about that, do you think that the automatic pilot is people who are consuming past services, and the remote control people are the people we need to innovate with because they're seeing their lives differently?
And could you pass the mic along to just the person nearby you there? Yeah.
Sure. Hi, my name's Tony. I'm with EY. I was actually curious to some of the conversations you'd had around customers having a hard time predicting what they want to do, and also this notion of push notifications versus others. Specifically, when you think about the concept of ego depletion and the notion of how much mind share people actually have, which is finite, to make a decision, and then maybe an economic perspective of how much of that mind share do they actually want to spend on the decision they're making, how do you guys at Google and GrubHub make that decision of how much time can we take?
Okay, and we're going to add a third question that's been coming through the app, which is, when the customer and the user are different, who do you design for? Anyway, so who'd like to, why don't you go first, Beth? Any of those you want to respond to? Maybe the last spoken one particularly?
I was going to start with the remote control question. I think that the populations converge. I think that there are folks today who get it. Maybe they live in San Francisco where suddenly everything is on demand. Like, why do laundry if you can press a button and someone will come and do it for you? And not everyone has that as an option. But as these things roll out more broadly across the country, you're going to see more and more people thinking this way, and I think there will be a transformation in the way that people delegate their time and their attention. So,
I mean, to the comment here on does the user always know what they want? I mean, I guess the way we think about this is there are first-order consumer problems or unmet needs and second-order problems and unmet needs, right? So first-order problem is, it's my niece's birthday, I need a bike, who can give me a bike, right? And the consumer usually can tell you those kinds of things. But when you think about second-order needs, and I'll use our project on Project Chauffeur, our driverless cars experiment, right? Like typically if you do a focus group and say, would you like a driverless car? you're not going to get 10 out of 10 people that raise their hand, because that's a sort of a first order question. But the second order question, which is, are you aware of the fatality rate on our roads or in the US and around the world, and actually, how unsafe of an experience it is? Do you know someone maybe who's unfortunately been involved in a serious accident, et cetera? As a society, then that becomes an important second order question. So we often think about having projects or project teams solving first order questions, giving you a search result for a good bike for your niece's birthday gift, but then so-called moonshot or 10X teams, where it's a second order kind of a question in order to address those bigger human or societal problems.
So I think, it was Henry Ford, I think, who said if we'd listened to the customer, they would have told us build faster horses.
Yeah,
So,
Steve Jobs with a famous quote as well.
Yeah, and how does Google decide, what it's going to pick as the, what's its thought process about the customers' long-term needs that would lead to the car
this is where
experiment?
we've got, to the previous panel, we do have an innovation group. We're all innovative and are charged with that as Googlers, but this is our Google X group that's been much written and much talked about, led by Astro Teller, and the X group is in particular charged with those second order innovations, and that's where you can imagine they look for sort of macro forces, trends, things like the fatality rate on the roads, and innovate against that as opposed to what a consumer might tell them in a focus group this afternoon they immediately want.
So have we got some more comments and questions from the floor? Yeah, right at the front here. The mic will come to you.
Isn't there a classical chicken and egg, Nikhil Balram, Rico Innovations. Isn't there a classical chicken and egg problem in the sense that if you do such a great job of giving me a finely tuned set of products and services tuned to my tastes, how will my tastes ever evolve?
You were addressing that to me. I'll start. This is similar to the sort of the question about, sometimes comes a phrase as the echo chamber question, right? Like, if all I ever do is watch Fox News, how are you ever going to learn another opinion or the other side of the argument, right? So, look, I think this is where, this is one of the powers of apps versus web. So app, right, for example, if I load, use any company as an example, if I load the Best Buy app on my phone, and if all I do is use Best Buy to meet my needs, then I'll have a narrower and narrower set of what else is out there, right? Whereas that's why, we at least continue to believe the power in the M web is that, then when I type in, whatever, best 52-inch plasma LCD TV, I might get back some other choices on a broader set of results from MWeb than from the 4, 5, 6 apps that I have on my phone. Again, not a right or a wrong answer, but I think it's a yes and.
We're getting close to being out of time, so I just wanted to get each of you to wrap up with, I suppose as I think about my own customer experience, there are two things in which I would really like it to be much improved. The first is I would like, when I have a complaint, for that to be dealt with quickly and without me being even more pissed off at the end of the process than I was going into it. And the second is I would like one day for myself to go to Amazon or any other company with a recommendation engine and find that they had the slightest clue about what I really cared about and would actually like to read next. How close are we to solving either of those two challenges for the vast majority of consumer experiences? I'm going to start with you, Jim.
Yeah, I might invite our audience to give a test run of one of our products that we've got running as an experiment called Google Now, which you opt into, and again, I repeat, opt into with your permission. It connects some of the Google products, for example, your calendar, or your Gmail, or some of the searches that you've done, and in real time then allows things, for example, to surface as push notifications. Your flight has been changed, delayed, different gate. You can ask it real language questions like, when will my package arrive? Without having to then go to FedEx and type in the tracking number and such. So, for example, my Google Now knows that I frequently search the Chicago Blackhawks schedule and scores, and now it pushes those to me in advance. So that's one of the experiments that we've got running in that area. With your permission, fully opt-in or opt-outable.
And do you think you're getting closer? Because I remember there was that famous article in the Journal a few years ago. If you remember TiVo, there was the headline was, "My TiVo thinks I'm gay." And it was basically, it was select because of your choice. Are we getting past that problem stage now with Google Now, where you feel it does understand correctly, more or less
I've not
what you're
heard that
after.
consumer complain about Google now,
No.
so specifically. But yes, I mean, I think we're very bullish on that product as one that is taking together, with your permission, these different disparate signals and trying to be useful, helpful, and relevant in real time.
Bob, what about you? What do you think about those two
Well, I mean, I
questions?
do think that you know, the dissatisfaction is really a disassociation with your expectations. So you know, the more we're understanding about you know what the intent, your action is to perform, then the better we can do in ensuring that the expectations are met. So whether it's a logistic-related expectation, whether it's a product or service-related expectation, this notion of really being able to have that immersive experience and being able to take real-time actionable insight on those channels where you communicate with that brand or about that brand are very, very essential. And I do think we're at that point where we can be able to offer those experiences now.
So you really think we're close to the point where I'm not going to feel my complaint process is going to be more make me angrier than that's going to actually solve my problem?
Yep, I do. And you know, again, it's a non-trivial process to be able to link together those aspects of where you're communicating with the information that's within an enterprise today. So it's possible, but organizations do have to make the investment to do that.
Beth?
And I think from our perspective, rather than finding the best way to handle your complaint, we want to preempt the need for you to complain in the first place. So
Well, that's obviously the ideal.
no, but that's where we're putting our attention.
Right.
So we say, okay, you know, our biggest complaint from customers is always, where's my food? So why don't we preemptively tell them the food status? And so we are building out as much as we can that capability to give people the ability to track their grub and know when things are happening and know, you know, here's what the restaurant estimated, here's the status, here's what's really going on. There's no need to get in touch with us.